of them. You're with Julian on the Brown Note, why I stand with Facebook and why the Facebook news blackout in Australia is bliss. Now, I did a piece on this last year about August time about the Australian Media Bargaining Code, and there's a couple of points I want to make, and that is, again, the Australian news media. You would think something as huge as the Australian bargaining agreement, media bargaining agreement, causing Facebook to shut down access in Australia to news globally, would invoke some explanation as to what actually happened. It hasn't at all. What we get with really bad media is a discussion about the impacts of what's happened. What they should be explaining to the Australian public and to the public at large is what the Australian Media Bargaining Code was, why it was contentious, and why Facebook have acted the way they have. What we've got instead is them telling us the impacts of what Facebook are doing and the precedents it sets. It's amazing how we never hear about precedent setting when we talk about right-wing economic policy or anything like that, only when it's something bad that's already happened that they don't like. So the Australian Media Bargaining Code is a world first, and in Australia we have a very homogenous group with the Liberal Party who are in government, the Murdoch Press and Channel 9. We've got the least diversified mainstream news media in the developed world. If you're looking at newspapers that are printed, Channel 9 own Fairfax Media, who are one behemoth, and they print Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, and the Murdoch Press own all the others. That's it. The two people asking, and they get the Liberal Party to do their bidding, and in return, usually economic bidding or access or anything that they want, and in return, the Liberal Party is relentlessly promoted no matter what they do. Interestingly, the Murdoch Press now holds the Liberal Party and Scott Morrison more to account than the Sydney Morning Herald, who are the left-wing alternative, which is bizarre. Now, in this instance, Channel 9 and the Murdoch Press basically asked for this. No one in Australia, no alternative news media, not the ABC, not the SBS, no one was asking for this. But they asked for it and they got the Liberal Party to pursue it. And the idea is that Google and Facebook have to pay them their money to the Murdoch Press and Channel 9. Now, what really happened and why was it contentious? The main part, some of which have changed since I did my other piece in August, but the main elements of it that was so contentious was this. They basically wanted to ensure that they got preferential treatment to any other news entity on Earth from Facebook and Google. They wanted advertising revenue that they said Google made or Facebook makes to flow to them, which it doesn't do anywhere else in the world. Now, everything's been bunched together here, and there are multiple paradigms. Firstly, they made out in the Australian news media that the government the government had won against Google because Google signed up the Murdoch Press for millions, who aren't now pursuing Google for the media bargaining code, I don't believe, but they might still be, but I don't believe they are because they've signed up to them. This is a complete lie, and this is why our media is so bad. Last year, Google launched their own news service for which they are already paying multiple news entities, the Guardian newspaper, the BBC, to have content hosted in this particular environment, Google News or whatever it's called. This is what the Murdoch Press signed up for. It had nothing to do with the media bargaining code. And it had nothing to do with Facebook, whose paradigm is very different. Facebook's paradigm is you or I host a page on Facebook for free, and if lots of people follow it, we can say whatever we want and promote ourselves. So all these newspapers and all of these TV networks host their own pages for free on Facebook, which gives them more viewers than any other thing they're doing, and more interaction and more sponsorship angles and more advertising angles than anything else. They benefit from the vast reach of Facebook, and they want Facebook to pay them for that. for hosting a free page on Facebook out of choice, promoting content out of choice. They want Facebook to then give them money back, even though it's one of their largest revenue earners already. A complete fallacy. Other elements that were incredible were they were using it to attack public broadcasting in Australia. They actually wanted to be able to sue Google and Facebook if they gave preferential treatment to the SBS and ABC public broadcasters in things like search results. If Facebook decided that they weren't bothered about promoting the Murdoch Press anymore, and say Google had started featuring the ABC more in search results, they would sue them. That's part of the legislation that was so contentious. They excluded the ABC and SBS from receiving any of this media bargaining money. It was just for them. It was just for media entities, I think, who earned more than 600 grand a year and who also weren't public broadcasters. One of the most ludicrous parts of it was they wanted a 28-day window to assess any changes that Google or Facebook made to their algorithms. No one on earth has access to this information, and they wanted Facebook to give them access to Facebook algorithms and Google to give them access to Google algorithms 28 days in advance of them changing, to protect themselves for any negative search result changes. This is beyond ludicrous. This is insanity. They change these algorithms all the time. Why would Australian companies get a benefit that no other place on earth gets? Now, many parts of this legislation are hugely contentious. They wanted Google and Facebook to share data with them on their viewers and on who interacts with their pages. This is what they should be saying in the news media about why Facebook have reacted the way they have. Because they're not telling us this. They're saying that Facebook controls the world. These pages that they host on Facebook are voluntary pages that they benefit massively from already. This is the media entities in Australia throwing the Australian public under a bus to use us as a test case to then go to the rest of the world with. We are the test case, test tube baby here. Because we're a small enough environment, we're only like 4% of Facebook's revenue or something. They have thrown us under a bus as a test experiment to see if they can then go to other places in the world and try this same media bargaining code on. To the shock of everyone, Facebook banned the news. Never seen anything like it in technology in my life. It was jaw-dropping. I laughed out loud. It was hysterically funny because no one believed they'd do it. And what's happened since they did it is amazing, because you realise how bad the media is here, because all of the people arguing about it on the news pages on Google, if you look up the news, if you look up the Sydney Morning Herald or the Daily Telegraph, they're all the ones arguing against Facebook. They're the ones that asked for the media bargaining code. Slightly dodgy there, I think. Do you believe that you're going to get actual real news from these people when they're the people that asked for the media bargaining code? It's amazing that that's all we've got to turn to for news. But something incredible has happened, and this is why I hope it continues. Facebook has been bliss. It has been absolute bliss without all of these news entities. I don't argue. I haven't argued with anyone online in days. And I normally have heated arguments several times a day, always over what I perceive is right-wing news propaganda, or pro-liberal propaganda, or pro-Scott Morrison propaganda. I'm not seeing any of it on Facebook. What I'm seeing is lots of my friends, lots of people I know, actually posting stuff that's against the Liberals without having all this counter-information flying past me, or any of this really negative news coverage that infects our minds and makes us feel really dark and angry, and like Fox News in America, a sort of like a saline drip of this anger-inducing media just flowing past on your Facebook feed. It's gone. Now, another really important part that they're not telling you about, Facebook banned all news media. Now, it would be much better, of course, if they had allowed us to look at the news media that isn't involved in the media bargaining code, all of the independent or public broadcasting in Australia, and all of the rest of the world's media. Instead, they cut the whole thing off, which again is kind of beautiful. So the UK's BBC comes up as a no search result in Facebook. Fox News in America, no search result. Now, they're screaming blue murder because they're hiding behind charities, they're hiding behind weather stations. This is the fault of the Liberal Party, Channel 9 and the Murdoch media, because they insisted in the legislation who would be defined as news. And they insisted all of these people that have been kicked off Facebook were defined as news, so that Facebook had no choice if it wanted to opt out of this legislation, but to ban all of the things that all these people didn't want to be considered news. Charities didn't want to be considered news. The Murdoch Press, Channel 9 and the Liberal parties conspired to insist they were news, which is why they were removed and why they're being gradually brought back into the fold. They're the ones that made all these people be considered news. And it's a fascinating event. And I really don't think they thought it through, because our Liberal Party and Scott Morrison are absolute blundering idiots. They have screwed everything up. Look at our relationship with China and how costly that's been to us. They speak first every single time. And they thought that they could bully Facebook here. But what everyone's realising is it's a really nice place on Facebook without you, Australian news media. And while it would be nice to have the independent sources and the public broadcasters back, or access to overseas news, I'm kind of digging it. I mean, all I see is nice fluffy stuff or cat pictures on Facebook and people talking. People being social without being drowned out by this relentless, angry right-wing media that seems to dominate our thought process. So if you think that our dumb as mud Liberal government thought this through to the extent that Facebook thought this through, you don't think that Facebook have been planning this for an entire year, that they haven't had the best minds in the world working out what this unprecedented event, what impact it would actually have? Of course they have. You just took on $1 trillion company that is known for how smart it is, and you're not known for being smart yourself. So I stand with Facebook. I don't know how this will play out. No one does. But maybe Mark Zuckerberg does. I don't support everything that Zuckerberg does, and I don't support everything that Facebook does. But you choose where you stand. And I'm happier to stand with Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook than I am with the Liberal Party, the Murdoch Press, or Channel 9, who I perceive as a massive stain on this country. So I stand with you, Mark. Keep strong. And I won't be very disappointed if Facebook returns to what it originally was. A social media engagement with your friends and people you know. And to be honest, the news we are seeing there, which is what people are sharing, isn't the right-wing propaganda that we were getting before. It's just what people want to see. I like it. Keep it up. Keep up the band. This is from The Strokes. This is nice. Haven't heard this for a while.